Good day, class. Many people believe that you cannot successfully teach African American students anything without teaching them critical race theory. In addition to that, entrepreneurs are history buffs. And if I haven't told you, the reason why is that CEOs are paid millions of dollars to predict the future. And the way you're able to do that is by comparing the past to the present, which will give you the ability to predict what is going to take place in the future. In that spirit, I'm going to tell you guys a story. The history of the word nigger, which many of you probably refer to yourselves as did I when I was your age, with what you believe is a term of affection, was originally derived for the ancient Egyptian word Niger. Niger meant black god. There were no vowels in the ancient Egyptian language. And there was two places, Timbuktu and Kush, where all of the European kings and queens would send their children to be educated in college. The first colleges in the world were in Timbuktu and Kush in Africa. And these kings and queens, European kings and queens, wouldn't send their children to get educated to get a job. They would send them to Timbuktu and Kush to be educated on mathematics and science and astrology and religion, so that they could be seen as more royal in the eyes of their peers. And Egypt was a very rich nation, envied by the entire world, and was always being attacked by outside forces. So when Egypt was and Africa was finally conquered and carved up as you see it as it is today, England was overpopulated. Its prisons were overpopulated. And the English kings and queens came up with a plan to let all of their criminals out of jail and give them the option to go to a new world. That new world was America. The Pilgrims were criminals let out of jail. And they needed workers to work the land, this rich land of America. So white people and black people came to the United States as slaves. The white people came as indentured servants. And indentured servants means you work for a certain amount of time, and after a while you're able to work yourself out of freedom, into your freedom. The black people were not. We were considered slaves, chattel slavery. Chattel slavery was different than traditional slavery, of which was invented in Africa, slavery. It's been around since the beginning of time. Chattel slavery was a little bit different because it turned the human beings into animals. And this is why hundreds of millions of African slaves jumped from the ships in the transatlantic slave voyage from Africa to America, because they knew that death was better than bondage. And that's because our ancestors were likened to cattle and slaves. Many times you would see white girls with black children with ropes around their necks, running around like the way you carry your dog as a pet. So if a white person ever pats you on the top of the head, that is indicative of the fact that you were considered a pet in slavery. So don't tolerate that. And so the slaves were rebelling, and they wouldn't work the land, and they were killing their slave masters and burning down crop. And the slave masters, these what they call lords, ex-criminals, were growing tired of the rebellion. So they hired a consultant, a vicious slave consultant from the Caribbean, to come and teach them slave theory, which we probably invented, unfortunately, that would get the slaves under control and get them to work. And this slave master's name, again, his name was Willie Lynch. And his methods were diabolical. Some of his methods were to rape the black men and black women in front of each other. Rape. And this rape happened so frequently that it created a whole mulatto race out of that rape, out of the systematic raping, which was the instructions of Willie Lynch. And then Willie Lynch told them to institute a hierarchy of value on the lighter skinned slaves, and the darker skinned slaves were the less valuable slaves, and they worked in the field, and the lighter skinned slaves worked in the house. That was Willie Lynch. The raping of black men was called bucking the slave. That was the term, bucking the slave. We were made to eat out of troughs like horses, alongside horses. Willie Lynch also, one of his most vicious methods was to take the biggest, buckest, strongest slave, bring him out into the courtyard, tie both of his arms to the ends of a horse, tar and feather him, bring all the slave children and slave women out into the courtyard to watch this, pour gasoline on him, and light him a fire. And when he's burnt to a crisp, you take a whip and slap both of the horses on the backside that are tied to either ends of his arms and pull him apart for all of the other slaves to watch. This obviously terrified the slaves, but it taught the women that, you see that big strong buck over there that can wrestle pigs and horses and he's just incredibly strong? He can't protect you from me. So if you have a problem, you come to me. You don't go to him. I am your master. This reverberates even today. And the reason why he did that was because the female was the economic base that the slave master needed to get under control. Whatever resources the female slave had, she would come and then offer it up to the slave master willingly, based on this psychological, diabolical business that Willie Lynch inflicted. And the term lynching was named after Willie Lynch. There's even a town called Lynchburg, Tennessee or something, where I think Jack Daniels was invented by a black man. That liquor, that whiskey, was invented by a black man and taken from him. And but it was invented in Lynchburg, Tennessee. The reason why I'm telling you this is that on the back of the Levi jean tag, there is a picture of this. So whenever black people walk around with Levi jeans on, Willie Lynch is laughing at us from his grave. And whenever you see black women going out and buying, incredibly expensive clothing, and it is this Willie Lynch syndrome. Whenever you see black people refuse to buy anything from each other and are so desperate to go buy from people that don't look like them because they feel that's a way of coming up or making themselves seem more valuable in the eyes of society, that's the Willie Lynch syndrome. They call it a Willie Lynch chip. The reason I'm telling you this is because other races that have gone through hell, and the Chinese have gone through it, the Indians have gone through it, everybody goes through their hell over the course of civilization. The reason why the Chinese come and study so hard and they work so hard tirelessly together is because they know their history and they understand what's happened to them. This color thing that I talked to you about, lighter skin value and dark skin not so valuable, that was done to the Chinese as well, and that's what the whole Miss Saigon is about. All right, they're just as afflicted by it as we are. Okay? So, if you need a reason to buckle down in school and to work together to bring communities and prosperities together, there was also something I wanted to tell you guys about redlining, where out here in Long Island, there was a guy named Levitz who said that he created these utopic neighborhoods for white people, and literally written into the bylaws of the town is that you're never to sell a house to a black person. And these towns are set up all over this country. I'm sure there are probably tons of them in Chicago. All right? There were towns where black people, after slavery and after Reconstruction is after the Civil War, where black people started to do well and started to gain businesses with each other because we couldn't go buy from white people. And these towns began to prosper so much, some of them were called Black Wall Street. These towns were bombed by white militia. Dropped bombs on them, gunfights. There's one in Central Park in Manhattan, where it was one of the wealthiest neighborhoods, black neighborhoods in America. It was right in Central Park, which is a famous park in New York. They bombed it. It's now a lake. There are hundreds of towns throughout the country where this has happened. So, if you need a reason to come to school and apply yourself to the end of starting your own company, if you need to understand and see what's happening to you and what's happened to our people, I'm hoping that this story gives you a reason. It's called critical race theory, and many theologists believe that the reason why black and brown children are not persevering academically is because these stories have not been told. So this is a scientific experiment. Let's see what you do with it. Okay, now what we didn't go over for the review, I forgot to mention, is about talking about risk. All right, this is definitely going to be on the test. So the main takeaway here is that risk is any behavior that is going to stop success. And successful people avoid and run away from risk, while unsuccessful people live with risk almost as if it's some sort of weird aphrodisiac. To say that I can, like black people talk about keeping it real and going to jail, and I'm going to jail, son. I'm about to do 15 joints, like because we don't know the difference between at risk and model behavior. We just live with risk, and whatever failure comes from risk, we consider that success, which is absolutely insane. All right? So the best way and the only way to protect yourself from risk is to use models and formulas, right? And some people even put logic in their mathematical formulas, as you can see here, and combining the two. And when you get into the real world, if you become an engineer, design engineer, they'll have software packages that allow you to incorporate formulas and models and test them in front of your computer. All right, and that's what these are. AutoCAD and all these cool software packages. They allow you to use models and formulas on a computer and test it, because that's what research and development is. You test the model, recalibrate it with the formula until it works exactly the way you want it to. All right, and that's what research and development is. All right, so risk is going to be on the test, and just want to give you guys a heads up because I didn't tell you this on that other video that I talked to you about, where you're going to prepare for your test. Risk is everything. And many people say that you guys are at-risk students and you need to be saved. All right, you need, that's why there's so much fervor and so much to do about at-risk students. All students are at risk, white or black. But with black students, the risk factor is a lot higher. All right, you guys remember this? This is the chart, right? And that's how these economists refer to it. Let's look at the chart. And as I said before, the line that goes from east to west on the bottom, that's 90% of the time charts are the bottom line, that east to west, that's going to be the time. And 90% of the time, the north to south line over to the left-hand corner that says growth, That's basically the value. All right. The value could be money. It could be growth. It could be anything. But so time is along the bottom line. And the line that goes up and down is usually value or growth. What this chart, and that's what they're called, charts, and people, financial people talk in terms of charts, right? They'll chart out the history of the real estate market and see how it goes up and down, and in January it's down, and March it's up, and they'll say historically real estate tends to spike. Spike means goes up really fast in colder months. All right, I'm just giving you this is how they talk, right? So what I'm saying is these people, they know the history of a stock hundreds of years in the past, right? And they've watched its behavior. So when they know, as soon as February comes around, buy that stock, let's buy it. And as soon as it gets to be the hot months and people stop buying real estate, they start shorting it. All right, because they understand these charts and they understand these models and they understand behavior over history. So if you look, there's a bunch of what we talked about, how companies like Nike will use these different innovation methods or models of innovation to make sure that they can continue to sell their products, that there's demand, that people want their products, right? They make it easy for people to buy their product. And there's a whole list of them. Disruptive innovation is the first. We've already talked about that, right? But then there's application innovation, product innovation, platform innovation, line extension, all right, enhancement, marketing, experiential, all right, value engineering is even one of them. You guys are to look up the definitions of every last one of these, all right? If you want to be a CEO and you want to get paid $8 million a year, you have to know these. And you have to be able to apply them or come up with ways that you're going to apply them to the innovations that you're coming up with now. All right, right now for the last week, you guys are supposed to be making disruptors. Well, after you make your disruptor, it's just the first step. You need to sell it in boatloads for 10, 20 years. You don't want to make a disruptor, it sells for 1 year and then it goes out of style because somebody else is doing this. All right, you want to keep your disruptor in demand. So every one of these, we're going to go through each one of them. What is line extension? What is enhancement? What is marketing? All right. Some of this we've already gone through. Organic. We've already talked about a company growing organically. All right. Acquisition. All right. You want to go through these and you want to see how you can apply them to your disruptor. And you're going to get up and you're going to speak to your classmates and tell them how you came up with the idea for not only your disruptor, but how you intend to enhance the app for an application and product and platform. The first four. You want to get up and be able to publicly speak because remember, you're the president. You're the CEO. All right. Barack Obama was the president of a company called the United States of America. The United States of America is a money machine. And in that spirit, just to get back to a little bit of critical race theory, not too much, I don't want to overdo it here. But when what they call political entrepreneurs who founded this country, they realized that the white indentured servants and the black slaves, if they fought together, they would be too powerful. It was just too much. Right? They couldn't have poor whites and poor blacks fighting against them for their freedoms together. So they invented racism. It was an innovation. And it was designed to make the white people feel like they were better than the animals who were the black people, so that they could divide and conquer them. And it worked. It was an amazing innovation. All right? Excuse me. So, over the course of time, the South was more of a harvesting farmland, and the North was where the black people went to go be free, and that's where they allegedly felt that they were going to go into the North and be free. Obviously, we know that's not true. The North is just as racist as the South. All right? But after a while, there was something happened, and it was called the Industrial Revolution was coming. And that was a disruptor in itself. And it was the invention of the machine. Machines like dust croppers and big machines that could till soil in days, where it would take an army of slaves it would take them months to till all the soil of a plantation. These machines saved time and energy from manual labor, which means it made the slaves obsolete. They weren't necessary anymore. Right? Abraham Lincoln knew this. He knew this, and he wanted America. He saw into the future that America was going to be building these machines. And they not only wanted to sell these machines to the people in the country, they wanted to sell these machines throughout the world. So that means slavery had to end, because the rest of the world saw chattel slavery, which had made America such a superpower, as a sin against humanity. Even though they had participated in it, France and England and the Dutch had carved up Africa, they considered it a sin against humanity. And Abraham Lincoln knew that they wouldn't buy the machines that were being built in America if slavery was still part of the American cultural dynamic. And that's why the Civil War took place. It wasn't to free the slaves, because Abraham Lincoln had slaves. It was the invention of the machine that freed the slaves. And the South fought hard against this, because they knew that if they weren't allowed to have slaves and had to buy these machines, that their children's children would be enslaved by the banks. They would have to take loans out to buy these machines. And that's why the South fought so hard. They wanted to go on with their slaves, and they didn't want any part of this machine industrial revolution business, because it was very profitable for them. Cotton had made England a superpower. The entire European nation was built off of the backs of cotton. All right? That commodity. And this is why the South fought so hard. And the South was winning. The South was kicking the North's ass. The only reason the South didn't completely win the Civil War and secede from the Union was because they allowed black people to enter the military. And we turned the tides. We freed ourselves. We practically freed ourselves. Let me go back. They came up with it themselves, right? And if you see the scientific part instead of that side, I'll just give you a little hint. That's the science part, right? The scientist is discovering, instead of the pain this way, what if, and the engineer basically compares two things together. It's called critical thinking. And that's the basis of engineering, being able to see the difference between two things. You have to be able to do that. You have to know the difference between soccer and baseball, or say cricket and soccer, to invent football. Okay? That's you. If you can't see the differences, you're not going to see past them. You're not going to be able to innovate into the future. And that's what this logic statement is teaching you to do, all right? And this is what you're going to innovate. You're going to make your disruptive innovations with this logic statement. All right, and I'm going to teach you how to walk through this, and we're going to reverse engineering is a very powerful strategy. So at war, when one side would to shoot down the planes, enemy planes of the other side, the engineers would come out, pick up the plane, and go back to the lab and reverse engineer it, and then they would engineer their planes to be able to keep up, so that the other engineers didn't engineer planes that they couldn't shoot down in a dogfight. Reverse engineering is an important strategy, because you're going to have to reverse engineer your competition's products to make sure that your product is always better. You have to put your last product out of business with your latest revision. And if you do that, your business will thrive. And you do that with logic statements like this.